Welcome to another edition of In Focus on Titan TV. I'm your host, Ivana Nguyen. Our special guests are here today to talk about the humble beginnings of Cal State Fullerton. They are Kay Trust and Julie Island. Welcome, and we're excited to have you with us today. It is truly an honor to have both of you here on campus because you've left such a legacy. And since its establishment in 1957, Cal State Fullerton has grown to become the largest university in the Cal State system. Did you know that?
Yes, and I was there when it was much smaller, and it's been an exciting day all the way. President William B. Langsdorff was appointed in 1958 after it was determined where the county, where the state campus would be in Orange County. And it was, Fullerton was chosen probably because they had the best lobbyist. They were also considering Anaheim. Mm-hmm. And one of the factors regarding selection, the Fullerton campus was adjacent to property which would eventually become the 57 freeway. The Anaheim site included property that the 91 freeway actually cut through. And one of the senators from Sacramento came to visit the sites and look them over, and the Anaheim property was a little bit marshy, and that senator got stuck there that day. And so that also helped with the choice of Fullerton.
So what was the area like back then?
The campus of 252 acres that was selected was total orange groves with 4 ranch houses on it. And the first offices of the campus were located on the Fullerton High School campus. Our offices were in a building that had been condemned because it was not earthquake safe, and therefore our offices were on the second floor. No one could have an office on the first floor because of earthquakes. I started July the 1st, 1959, and at that time we had hired some of the very first faculty, but we didn't have a building, and we didn't really have all of the faculty people when I started.
And how many faculty members were there?
In the very beginning, there were 5 full-time faculty and a part-time faculty person. We actually, that first year, the full-time people numbered 6, and we, during that first year of the university, they hired from time to time about 20 part-time faculty.
And what was your job originally?
I was hired July the 1st, 1959, and I began as secretary to the business manager. The very first budget for the university that was submitted to Sacramento was sent in July 1959, and I typed that budget.
And exactly how large was the budget that you signed into Sacramento?
The one that we sent into Sacramento that very first time, I don't recall the exact dollar amount. We were having classes that first fall in Sunny Hills High School classroom spaces. That high school was just established, and they didn't need all of their classrooms. When the books arrived at Fullerton High School campus, they brought them to the middle of the campus, and the dean of students, the executive dean, the dean of instruction, the admissions and records manager and his assistant, and all of the clerks that were working at that time stood on the steps in front of this condemned building and passed the library books and textbooks one at a time to each other up the steps and moved them into the first floor of that building.
So when did the transition from Sunny Hills High School to the main campus happen?
Not until the springtime in 1960. And the temporary buildings were not totally complete at that time, were they, Julie?
No, they just had slabs poured for the temporaries.
Right. And we used some trailers, and we used barracks from a nearby air base, which were moved to the campus, and that's what we used for our very first classrooms. We continued to use some of the classrooms at Sunny Hills as well as those.
And how many students were enrolled at that time?
For that first fall semester, there were 452 students. Quite a difference from what we have now.
Yes, definitely a big difference. And how much was the tuition back then?
Tuition was around $33 a unit.
Wow, so today that's actually the equivalent to probably a junior college. And since then, the tuition has spiked from there. And back then, was there any type of scholarships, financial aid established for students?
Not established at that time. That didn't occur until later when we were on the main campus.
And when was there a greatest influx of students?
You know, the enrollment grew from that very first year until around 1979. We had 22,000 students, FTE students at that time, and we had a small decrease in students the previous 2 years, and it seemed as though we were sort of leveling off.
Mm-hmm.
And but in 1979 we had 22,000 students, and we thought we were really large then.
Were any more buildings put up to accommodate the number of students that were attending Cal State Fullerton?
Well, in 1961,
63.
The temporary buildings were completed.
Oh, the temporaries.
They were completed in 61, 62.
Yes.
And those housed the president of the university and all of the faculty and students at that time. The groundbreaking for the science building was what year, Julie?
1963.
1963. So that was our very first permanent building. That later became McCarthy Hall.
I see. And Julie, when did you come into Cal State Fullerton?
I came July 1st of 1960, having first applied at LA State University, and was told at that time that this university was on its way and I should really apply here, which I did, and found it very interesting to come into a campus that had no permanent buildings at the time, and a row of eucalyptus trees as windbreakers for the orange groves that they had out here. Beautiful eucalyptus trees.
And what was your job at that time?
I was a clerk typist working for the personnel officer and primarily assisting Kay and the business manager, who were swamped with all the various budgets that had to be put together and hiring. There was the equipment budget, there was the commencement budget, and the salary budgets. All that had to be put together. And with the equipment budget, a lot of the new faculty hadn't a clue as to what equipment they were really going to need. And our business manager, Jack Lyons, put an awful lot of that together in setting up these
He
budgets.
had the whole job for that.
So we had a lot of very happy faculty who had Jack's wonderful help on that.
I see. And you said that there are 5 original faculty members. Who were they?
That was Miles McCarthy, who your one building is named after, Seth Fessenden, and Larry DeGraff, and Barbara Hartzick, and Lester Beals. Am I missing?
Gary Amon.
And Gary Amon. Well, Gary Amon was Dean of Instruction. The students that came that very first year were working toward a degree in education. And the reason the university was founded was that it was following the war, and it was baby boomer time, and there was an extreme shortage of teachers for teaching, as well as the fact that they were trying to establish something that would allow women to expand their field in education. So all of those very first students were working toward a degree in education. The very first semester, one young man had just about completed his college work and just lacked like a couple of subjects. And he actually received his degree that very first fall. The spring semester, we had 6 graduates, and it was we were still in offices in 1960 in the condemned building. One day, the day of commencement, in fact, the caps and gowns arrived to our offices, and when the dean of students opened them, he said, "Oh my goodness, look how wrinkled they are." And I said, "Well, if someone will get an iron and an ironing board, I will press them." And so
did you?
And so I pressed the gowns for that very first commencement. There were 6 graduates.
And they were all going for a degree in education?
In education. At the very first time in the university, that's what they were all studying toward.
So when did you decide that there will be more majors offered to the students?
Well, that wasn't within my realm, but Dr. Langsdorff was directing the direction of the university, and it moved toward a liberal arts college at that time.
And how many more majors were offered?
I don't know exactly how many they added as we added other faculty members.
Mm-hmm.
We had which later became the School of Business and the School of the Arts, and it eventually developed into the type.
And what was the demographic for students?
It varied for different nationalities, and a lot of women and men students.
I think you told me that you were one of the first women to be a part of the staff. How was that like?
Well, when I was hired July the 1st, 1959, I was the 3rd woman hired. Interesting story about the building where our first offices were. There was a pigeon made its nest on the window outside the duplicating room, and by duplicating, at that time we had ditto machines and mimeograph machines, period. And it was not unusual to go into that room and see the dean of students running a ditto, or the executive dean running a mimeograph.
What are those?
What are those?
I don't even know.
Okay. That was the earliest type duplicating product that was available for offices. And the mimeograph was something that when you typed, it cut the letter into the film.
I see. Okay.
And if you made a mistake, of course none of us did that, If you made a mistake, you had this liquid material that you opened the paper up, the film up, and painted over it, and then you had to fit it into your typewriter and make it roll exactly to where that mistake was, and to try to make it exactly on that same line and correct it before you did it by hand like this.
So how did both of you meet then at Cal State Fullerton?
Well, when I applied in July of '60, Kay and Jack Lyons, the business manager, were snowed under with handling almost everything and needed help. We were housed in what we called the Marr House, the house right on
It's the
used
alumni.
to be Placentia Avenue, which is now State College Boulevard. Kay and I were housed in the kitchen, and I had a table in the kitchen with a typewriter. I had to jump right in. I had previously worked for the State Board of Education in Los Angeles a few years before that, and was a substitute clerk for the various schools throughout LA. So I had this payroll office background when I came to Cal State Fullerton. And Kay and Jack Lyons were doing all the hiring and appointing people and filling out documents to get them on the payroll and all that. And
I was glad to see her when she got there to take some of that workload.
so I got involved in that and eventually involved with both Kay and Jack Lyons in working on the various budgets. We would take work home at night. We would work sometimes till midnight working on these budgets. And I would take my typewriter home. I lived in La Mirada. I'd take my typewriter home and do work at home in La Mirada and all. So we formed a pretty good team.
Yes, we did.
Yes. And then we were small enough yet to develop social functions and all. And eventually, as the college was growing and the business office primarily spread out a bit, we had social things. We had picnics and we'd get together for picnics. We got to the point where we got to know each other's families. We watched each other's kids grow up, some of them eventually becoming students at Cal State Fullerton. And it was a great place to work. It was a fun place as well as a very busy place. So that's when I started in July of 1960. And in the house we occupied there on campus, it was loaded with termites. And all the windowsills, the windows, doors leaked. Come to work in the morning, we'd have to cover our typewriters and our equipment, our telephones, before going home in the evening, and come back the next day. And it's a good thing we covered it. There would be dust everywhere, termites coming through, and dirt coming through the windows and doors. So
we survived it.
We did. It was fun with the early beginnings, and then to watch the university develop and all. So.
Were there any other hardships that you had to overcome?
Well, distance was a factor in the earliest years because the students were on the Sunny Hills High School campus and the offices were on the Fullerton High School campus. And then as we were able to move to the main campus, then we were spread out quite a ways for a while. But, we didn't consider it as hardships because that was such a exciting experience. Every day something new occurred, or we got a building you know, it's just hard to express how rewarding and almost overwhelming it is to see something like that develop and to know that you're part of it and that you gave a small amount to making it happen. And it's true that we did work lots of nights to midnight. You know, the camaraderie that we had in the offices in that old condemned building was unlike anything you can express or feel, because it didn't matter whether you were the president of the university or the dean of students or one of the clerks. Everybody gave their full amount, and we all felt so close because we were part of such a big, wonderful thing.
And seeing Cal State Fullerton today, are you happy with what you see?
I miss the way it was in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
However, it's really wonderful to see that the student body has grown to those numbers. I'm so very proud. And it's wonderful to have the money that was donated to make the wonderful buildings that the students now have. I feel like I probably don't realize how long it actually takes to get from a place to park to, you know, parking was only $13 a semester
Wow.
when we moved to this campus.
As a student, I can tell you that we wish we had those prices now.
Well,
that
we
had back
complained
then.
about that
Mhm.
severely because it was 252 acres and most of it was orange groves, which little by little were knocked down and hauled away. And we just felt like, you know, there were acres and acres of ground here, and so why should we have to pay to park?
And Julie, what about you? Are you happy with what you see here?
I'm lost. I cannot believe the size of this campus. They had initially projected a total of 30,000 students. I don't know what your enrollment is right now, but they've eaten up the 252 acres and have spread even beyond that. And I would drop into campus from time to time after I retired in 1983, and I could keep up with what was going on and find my way around. But when I was here for the 50th reunion of the campus, I was absolutely lost.
Right.
Had no idea what
I was
was
as
where.
well.
In the early days, I knew exactly where every building was and how to get there around campus and all. No more.
Right, because the whole university has.
Oh, it's
grown so
changed
much
so
since then.
that I'm lost coming in today. When we were driving out, she said, well, which way do you think we ought to go to get to the library building? And I said, well, just take that road in front of McCarthy Hall and let's see what happens.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us today. That's all the time we have here today. Thank you, Kay and Julie, for your contributions to the school and leaving us with a legacy that will last forever. I'm Ivana Nguyen, and thank you for watching In Focus on Titan TV. See you next time.